My name is Pastor Samuel Reed. I'm 74 years old, living in a quiet town in Georgia. I've been preaching the gospel for decades, yet nothing in my years of ministry could prepare me for the journey I'm about to share. This isn't a story I tell lightly, but I feel compelled because someone out there needs to hear it. 3 months ago, I traveled to India for a routine medical procedure. I'd visited India before, many years ago when my parents were missionaries, but this time was different. The hospital was pristine, the doctors highly trained, yet one mistake changed everything. I was lying on the operating table, sedated but conscious enough to hear muffled voices. Then came a rush of panic as the anesthetic took over. I could feel myself slipping away. The moment my heart stopped, everything faded to black. And then I opened my eyes, but I wasn't in the hospital anymore. I found myself standing in a vast expanse, somewhere between light and shadow. A warm breeze carried whispers, as if the very air was alive. Then, without warning, a piercing light broke through, flooding the space with a radiance so intense I could barely keep my eyes open. That's when I saw him. Jesus stood before me, his presence overwhelming, his gaze piercing, yet filled with a love I can't describe. "Samuel," he said, his voice both gentle and commanding. "There is something you must see." I nodded, unable to speak. In an instant, we were moving, not walking but gliding through what I can only describe as the fabric of the spiritual world. Colors and sounds surrounded me, some so beautiful they brought tears to my eyes, others dark and discordant, filling me with unease. Jesus said nothing at first, letting the scene unfold. Suddenly I saw a child. He couldn't have been older than 3, sitting on the floor in a dimly lit room. His parents were arguing in the background, their voices sharp and filled with anger. The boy's wide eyes darted around the room as if searching for safety, but none came. Then, I saw it, a shadow creeping toward him. It moved unnaturally, with a sinister grace, and before I could call out, the shadow slipped into the boy. I turned to Jesus, horrified. "What is happening?" I asked. "Demons," he replied solemnly. "They enter through cracks left by sin, chaos, and fear. This is how it begins." I watched as the boy grew older, his life playing out like a tragic movie. The anger in his home festered within him, opening the door to more shadows. By the time he was 10, his heart was a battlefield. Tears streamed down my face. "How can this be? He's just a child." Jesus placed a hand on my shoulder. "Samuel, remember your own story." The words hit me like a thunderclap. Memories I had long buried came rushing back. Of my childhood in India, of the demons that had entered me before I even understood what they were. And then just like that, I was 9 years old again. I was 9 years old, standing in the missionary home my parents had set up in the heart of India. The sights and smells of that place were as vivid as if I had never left. My father was a stern man, devoted to his work, and my mother, though loving, was often too busy to notice me. They trusted me in the care of an ayah, an Indian nanny, who wasn't a Christian. She was kind in her way, but her world was steeped in Hindu traditions, rituals, and idols. I was a lonely boy then, often left to my own devices. I would wander the vast, humid countryside, talking to myself to pass the time. Back then, I thought it was innocent, a child's imagination. But as I stood there, reliving the past, I realized those imaginary conversations had an unnatural edge. I didn't just talk to myself. I spoke as if there were others with me. "Shall we go outside?" I would ask. "What should we do next?" I wasn't alone, even when no one was there. Jesus stood beside me in that memory, silent but watchful. He didn't need to explain. The truth was dawning on me. The voices I had heard weren't my own. They were spirits, demons, that had slipped into my young, impressionable soul. They whispered things that seemed harmless at first, guiding my thoughts and actions, but their influence grew darker over time. The scene shifted abruptly. I was sitting at the dining table, a small boy with an oversized appetite, eagerly devouring a slice of melon. My father, in one of his playful moods, decided to tease me. He distracted me with a question, and while I turned away, he snatched the melon from my plate. When I looked back and saw it gone, I erupted. Rage consumed me like a wildfire. I shouted in Hindustani, the language I had picked up from the ayah, and accused the servants of stealing my food. My little fist slammed against the table, my face red with fury. Everyone laughed, thinking it was harmless child's play. But now, standing there with Jesus, I saw what I hadn't understood then. That was the moment. I whispered, my voice trembling. The spirit of anger entered me. Jesus nodded, his expression grave. Demons exploit even the smallest cracks, Samuel. A child's mind is fertile ground, unaware, unguarded. Anger, fear, loneliness, all could be entry points. I wanted to argue, to defend my father, my upbringing. But the truth was undeniable. My father's teasing wasn't malicious, but it had opened a door. And that wasn't the only door left ajar. Another memory surfaced, one I had suppressed. I was barely 2 years old, cradled in the arms of the ayah as she hummed a haunting melody. She carried me to the corner of the room where a small idol of a Hindu god stood. She bowed before it, and without hesitation, she lifted me, pressing my tiny hands together in a gesture of prayer. I didn't know. I cried out, my voice echoing in the void around us. The devil is not fair, Samuel, Jesus said gently. He preys on the innocent. That idol worship, though meaningless to me as a baby, had allowed something dark to take root. The spirits from that moment followed me through life, intertwining with other demons that came later. They whispered lies. Anger was strength, loneliness was safety, fear was unavoidable. Together, they shaped my thoughts and actions, even as I grew and eventually gave my life to Christ. As I stood in the presence of Jesus, shame washed over me. I had been a pastor for decades, yet I had never fully understood how deeply those childhood encounters with darkness had affected me. Why are you showing me this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Jesus' eyes met mine, filled with a love that pierced through my guilt. Because you need to tell others, Samuel. The devil hides in plain sight, and too many parents are blind to how their children are exposed. Show them the truth. His words were both a command and a promise. The weight of what I had to do settled on me, but so did a strange peace. This wasn't just my story. It was a warning for others. The scene began to dissolve, but I knew this was only the beginning of what Jesus had to show me. As the memory faded, the scene shifted again. I was now in my early 20s, standing in the pulpit of a small church. It was my first time preaching, and I remembered every detail. The scent of polished wood, the glint of sunlight streaming through stained glass, and the nervous energy bubbling in my chest. The congregation stared back at me expectantly, and I poured my heart into the sermon. When it was over, the applause was thunderous, or so it felt. People lined up to shake my hand, offering compliments that fed something deep within me. "You have such a gift," one woman exclaimed. "You'll go far," another said. I smiled humbly on the outside, but inside, I was soaring. Pride. Jesus stood beside me, his gaze focused on my younger self. "You thought you were serving me, Samuel, but who were you really serving?" I wanted to protest. "I was trying to honor you. I preached the truth." Jesus' eyes softened, and he placed a hand on my shoulder. "Yes, you preached the truth. But who were you thinking of when you stood at that pulpit? My glory, or yours?" The truth hit me like a wave. I had taken the stage for him, but as the years went on, it had become more about me. I wasn't just preaching to save souls. I was preaching to prove something, to myself, to others. That demon of pride had slithered into my ministry unnoticed, disguising itself as ambition and drive. Another memory rose to the surface. I was in my 30s, leading a growing church. People praised me for my leadership, my vision. I basked in their approval, never realizing how it fed the darkness within me. My prayers became more about success than surrender. "Lord, make this church bigger," I would pray. "Give me influence." I turned to Jesus, my heart breaking under the weight of my own failings. "I didn't see it," I admitted. "I thought I was doing it for you." "The enemy is subtle, Samuel," Jesus said, his voice firm but kind. He knows you would never openly reject me, so he found another way. Pride can masquerade as zeal, ambition, even righteousness. But at its core, it's a rejection of dependence on me. I fell to my knees, overwhelmed. What do I do? How can I undo this? Jesus reached down, lifting me gently. You can't, but I can. Remember, Samuel, my grace is sufficient. My power is made perfect in weakness. You must warn others, especially those who lead. Pride is the poison that destroys ministries from within. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. I thought of all the times I had judged others for their sins, never realizing how much pride had corrupted my own heart. The scene shifted again, but Jesus' words stayed with me. This wasn't just about my story. It was a call to repentance for every leader, every believer who thought they were untouchable. And then, we stepped into the darkest memory yet. The next scene was starkly different. The warm, nostalgic hues of my childhood and the familiar comfort of my ministry were gone. Instead, I found myself in a shadowy room lit by the flicker of a single candle. A child sat on the floor, cross-legged, playing with what looked like an old wooden figurine. I froze. That child was me, no more than 9 years old. The air felt heavy, oppressive, as if something unseen lingered in the corners of the room. My younger self seemed oblivious, absorbed in his play. But then I noticed something I had never seen before. Dark shapes loomed around the room, their forms shifting like smoke. They weren't fully visible, but their presence was undeniable. They were always there. Samuel, Jesus said, standing beside me. His tone was solemn, almost mournful. You just couldn't see them then? What are they? I asked, my voice trembling. Demons, Jesus replied. They sought to infiltrate your life from an early age through seemingly harmless things. And they succeeded. I watched as the shadowy forms circled my younger self. One leaned in close, whispering inaudible words into his ear. The boy paused, his brow furrowing, as if reacting to the unseen suggestion. Children are vulnerable, Samuel, Jesus continued. Their hearts are tender, their spirits impressionable. Demons exploit this, using anything they can. Fear, anger, pride, even loneliness. I felt a lump rise in my throat. But why? What do they want with children? Children are precious to me, Jesus said, his voice resolute. And because they are precious to me, they are targets for the enemy. Demons bring what appears to be goodness and glory to Satan. They twist everything unholy into something that seems desirable. They make sin look appealing and righteousness unappealing. By corrupting children early, they lay a foundation for greater destruction later. I watched helplessly as one of the demons placed a hand on the child's shoulder. A cold shiver ran down my spine. The boy, my younger self, shuddered but didn't seem aware of what was happening. This is when loneliness opened the door, Jesus said. Your parents were busy with their ministry, and though they loved you, their absence left a void. The enemy exploited that void. The memory shifted, and I was now watching another scene. I was older, maybe 10, standing in the courtyard of our home in India. A group of local children was playing nearby, but I stood apart, hesitant to join. You learn to retreat inward, Jesus said, to talk to yourself because you felt no one else would listen. And the enemy took advantage of that, planting seeds of isolation and self-reliance. Tears streamed down my face as I realized how these moments, so seemingly insignificant at the time, had shaped my life. Can these chains ever be broken? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jesus turned to me, his eyes blazing with authority. The enemy's power is real, but it is not final. My blood breaks every chain. You have already been delivered, Samuel. But now you must warn others. Parents must guard their children, not just physically, but spiritually. The home must be a sanctuary, not a battleground for the enemy. The scene dissolved, and I was back in the hospital room, gasping for breath as the medical team surrounded me. I had returned to my body, but my spirit had been forever changed. Even now, decades later, the memories of that encounter burn within me. I share them not to frighten, but to awaken. The enemy is subtle, but he is not victorious. With Christ, every chain can be broken and every captive set free.
Thank you for taking the time to hear this incredible story. The spiritual battle is real, but so is the power of Jesus to redeem, restore, and set us free. If this testimony touched your heart or gave you new insight into the unseen world, we encourage you to share it with others who might need this message of hope and truth. Your support allows us to create more content like this, so don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos. We release fresh content to inspire and equip you on your faith journey. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts or your own experiences with God. And of course, don't forget to like this video to help others discover this message of spiritual awakening. Together, we can spread the light of Christ to a world in desperate need. Thank you, and God bless.